Okay, episode 1 of that new patch 2 game, I think it was called, where I played Early Age Orm. And you'll notice that I'm starting at turn 12. This is part of the new sort of summary style structure I want to work with, wherein each episode covers a space of probably around 12 turns. Roughly, I might move back and forth on that, where we basically cover key checkpoints of the game, what my decision making was at that point. We cover the strategy in a little bit more detail, and then we jump forward in time to see how all the execution happened. This format, I think, will take the emphasis off battle-to-battle scripting and things that people have seen before. And in this case, what that means is I've skipped most of early expansion. The reason being that I think most people know how to do early expansion, particularly troop-based expansion. And turn 12 is about the point in the game where I got a diplomatic handle on who all the actors were, what my relationships with them were likely to be, and what my plan for the game going forward was. So, let's quickly summarise what happened up to turn 12. I had pretty rough expansion as Early Age Orm. In all my test games, I did considerably better than this. This is 12 provinces at turn 12. The reasons were manifold. There were a couple of things. There were a few bad indie drops which wiped out expansion parties. There was one case where a lone commander got the famous arrow to the head and then reversed. The combination of indie attacks and that meant that I had to double back and retake provinces a lot more than I had expected. And the biggest one was there was a major bump with Calum in 175 over the Grain Coast. This was a very heavily garrisoned province by Indies. I went in, I took it, so I killed the heavy cavalry and everything like that, taking losses, and then the Calum army jumped on top of it and wiped me out. So they won that particular bump. It was not a great start to things. It was due to a failure of people to respond on Discord in time. And all of those factors combined, plus the fact that my neighbours actually expanded quite well in all cases, meant that I'm relatively hemmed in. I have a little bit of room to go, and I've used agreements to make sure I have a little bit of room to go, but not a huge amount of room. So I'm at 12 provinces right now. By treaty, so with Maconi has guaranteed me 137, Gold Fens. Calum has guaranteed me 150, which is the throne, and 187, so I can take these three. The rest of my expansion is pretty much done. The result is that I'm relatively poor. I have started dispersing mages. I got a D2 random on a shaman really early, so I've started dispersing site searches all over the place to start searching myself for gems. And I think there's a few searches this turn. Haven't found anything good yet. You can see what the expansion does look like. This was 62 barbarians. We lost 11 troops fighting it. This was 60 tribals. We lost 8 axe warriors fighting it, and none of our steel maidens. Let's look one battle. I just quick honourable mention for our Ormish troops. I think a lot of our casualties will be the archers. So we come in, the throwing axes get thrown, the steel maidens pass through, axes come over, do more damage. Steel maidens have heavier armor, which is why I wanted them to flow through and fight the dagger wielders. And then they just slice them down because they're all lawnmowers, which is great. Just not enough protection to protect them from that many arrows and whatnot. So yeah, the archers got all of the enemy kills. And I think one friendly fire kill from an axe. So yeah, harsh. But what is happening in the game, and what was my strategy at this point that I had decided on? I knew I was going to have to complete expansion, and then I knew I was going to have to make my mark on the world. In order to win a game with relatively weak early expansion, my reasoning basically went, okay, so I need to now make sure that no one near me gets enough of a leg up on me that I can't then beat them. Otherwise, my relatively weak opening is going to turn into a massive opportunity for them. And the key here is Theridos. Theridos is in this lake. They are here, they're here, they've taken all this water, they're down here, they're looking really strong. And the problem with Theridos is that I can't actually fight a war with them, in that I can knock them off the land relatively easily, but if I get stuck in an actual war with Theridos, I will suffer the problem of not being able to actually counterattack. I've got in the early game, this is an early game point, I have no way to go underwater and fight him. And even late game, in the early game, Therados they've got the more of their recruitable units than they will at any other point in the game. So they've got a lot of Sacreds, and they took a very strong Incarnate Awake Bless on their Sacreds, coupled with an Awake Expander, which means that fighting them underwater is just not a good option. So the trick then becomes to make sure that Therados doesn't grow enough that they are markedly larger than me to the point that they're tempted to eat me, particularly because eating me would be a natural extension of sweeping this throne and these trolls up here, taking these 2 provinces, and then sweeping me would actually be a relatively good move on their part if I allow them to get to the point where they're confident that they could do it. And that means they have enough territory to fight me on the land. So we've got to avoid that situation. Then we look at our other neighbours. For me, I'm really scared of Helheim. So Helheim is down here, south of Makoni. Played by a very competent player, which means that you've got to counterbalance them relatively early. Otherwise, if they expand and grow, they're going to be really, really dangerous. The other nation I'm scared of is Hinnom over here. I'm semi-scared of the birds, but I'm mostly scared of Hinnom. So I put some feelers out to figure out where people's diplomacy was at. Makoni was very friendly, and they have magic weapons on their excellent troops, which puts them in a good position to at least help punt Therados off the land if required. So I decided that even though I have a really, really good matchup with Makoni, I can't afford to fight them first, and we'll get to one of the reasons why in a moment. Hinnom is expanding really, really well, but when I talked to Calum, it became clear that Calum was willing to fight Hinnom. And with Calum fighting Hinnom, I was like, oh, I kind of want to let that play. The other reason is that while I can elf birds can bird me back. It's just an annoying war that's unlikely to be immediately decisive. So I was happy to let this war play. Tir na Nog was looking at going to war with Helheim. So I kind of wanted to let Tir na Nog go. So I ended up signing agreements here, here, and here. Why did I not sign an agreement over here with Saramatia? There's 2 reasons here. One, the much less important reason is that Saramatia is a scary nation. The most important reason is that Therados made it very clear that Saramatia was going to be their first target. And by turn 12, Therados is already either have attacked or they're positioning to attack Saramatia. It's very clear at that point. So I think my read at this point in the game is that Therados going this early before Saramatia gets their best tricks online, and given the bless and the resources and the luck that Therados have had with their events and the stacks that people have reported seeing, is that because I think Therados is up in this lake already at this point. Like, they've made the jump from here, they've got in here, they're really nestled. They may even have this throne at this point. They're a clear and present danger to Saramatia, and they're probably going to win. Now, if they're probably going to win, then we have to attack Saramatia, in my view, because we have to deny them as much of the spoils as possible. If Therados gains 4 or 5 provinces of Saramatia, and I gain 4 or 5 provinces of Saramatia, at least there's still some symmetry between us. Whereas if I fight Makoni and he eats all of Saramatia, not only at that point have I gained a border which is less advantageous. So the border set here, he's got water on both sides, which means he's actually got a lot of room to maneuver and raid, and I only have one angle by which to counterattack. So this province is actually really important. These here, if I can take them, but this is particularly important to me because it denies this one as a flanking option. So I feel like we have to attack Saramatia and leave Tir na Nog to fight Helheim, quite possibly with Makoni, it sounds like, because it sounds like Helheim might be wanting to attack Makoni at this point in the game. Let Calum fight Hinnom, and let's go save the furniture with Saramatia before Therados can roll over them. Because this is going to be a super early game war, the strategy is going to still be troop-based. We are not at the point in the game, and we won't be at the point in the game where magical support is important enough to be worth deploying mages who could be researching or site searching. We're up to 60 research points at the end of the first year, and our first targets have been, we had Thaum 2 was our random that we started the game with, and we're picking up Enchantment 2, which will get us a couple of useful things, including personal regen. Then we'll go up to Enchantment 3, which is the real winner, because Strength of Giants, having Strength of Giants and then grabbing Conjuration 3 for Summon Earth Power is our first real buff script. It gives us the ability to drop +4 damage on big blocks of dual-wielding troops, and obviously having a dual-wielding troop actually means you gain additional marginal benefit from a cast because you're fitting more attacks into a square and thus you're getting that +4 more often. And having high damage attacks to start with means that +4 is more likely to put us at a HP breakpoint over armor and significantly inflict our damage, i.e. we're likely to actually get 4 extra damage out of our targets rather than still just plinking off the armor. Alt 2, couple of basic buffs, stone skin and stuff like that. Earth Meld, early point, and then eventually what we're going to want to do is we're going to go to Alt 4 and grab Swarm, because Swarm is another one of Early Age Orm's early combat spells. We're doing okay on gems, not great. I think we found 1, 4, 5, 6. So we found 2 gems at this point in the game. No, we found 1 gem at this point in the game. So we're not doing good. I take it back. We're doing badly at this point in the game. It's a solidly mediocre start. We're not out of the game because most people will be. This is a very cramped map, by the way. Most people will be in a relatively tough position, but being surrounded by this much water that we can't readily go into until we get construction magic. The need to counter Therados almost at all costs, lest they become an existential threat, is basically solving the question of which early war do we do. Because the only other option would be we could support Saramatia and fight Therados, but then we're literally signing ourselves up to a forever war, because we do not have the tools to go into the water and counterattack at this point, and the land holdings they have, these 2 provinces, are not significant enough to justify going that war. Like, we're not hurting them that much by taking these 2, but we're pinning all of our forces down. In the end, he can just keep a few limited forces here to force me to keep material here and then go kill someone else, in which case he's growing and I'm not. Can't afford to do it at this point in the game. So the move is going to be Saramatia to open with. I'm going to jump forward in time to around about the point where we're in the position to launch that offensive, so you can see how I constructed it and what the point of it was, and we'll see how the initial stages went and talk about the diplomatic developments that were happening at the same time. So we're actually going to cover a heck of a lot of turns in this first episode, and it's still going to be relatively short because the game is not particularly complicated, but I'll get back to you after that attack has completed. Okay, we're in turn 19, which will be the final turn of episode 1 of New Patch 2 as Early Age Orm. Turn 19 was the turn that I launched my attack on Saramatia. It took a fair amount of time to get troops over there, get them infiltrated, during which time Therados absolutely did invade and started making significant progress. However, a couple of other developments happened at the same time. The first was Helheim attacked Makoni, and when I say attacked, I mean they absolutely stomped them. Makoni was able to get them like a significant force inside their capital walls, but for the most part, the Helheim horde, led by Nosy Rat, just swept over Makoni without much fuss, really. There are a couple, as I've turned 19, this war's only been going on for like 3 or 4 turns. Makoni is forced back to just a couple of water provinces, and their capital is basically all they hold at this point. Their thugs are not great against the force that Helheim has brought, which includes some significantly blessed sacreds, I believe, running invuln blesses on their ponymen troops, which makes them very, very tough to counter. So this becomes a clear and present danger at this point. This is one major development. The second major development is that Tien and Og does indeed hint that they are willing to fight Helheim, and the wars over this way have truly commenced. So Helheim is fighting hard against an alliance of Vanheim and Calum. Hinnom has expanded very strongly, but is outmatched in the war, is my assessment based on the intelligence I'm getting at this point. If we look closely at the war against Saramatia, you can see there's one very important factor that it's easy to miss if you just look at the battle reports, which gives me considerable pause. Let's see if we can find it. So battle 1, easy, slaughtered PD. You can see even cavalry is not really a match for the infantry blobs I'm bringing. Again, slaughtered PD, slaughtered PD, slaughtered PD. Here, this is the battle I want to show you. And it shows you 2 things about Saramatia that I'm concerned about. First is the Sarmatian Cataphract. Now, a Sarmatian Cataphract costs 3 times as much as our infantry, closer to 2 when you're looking at the Steel Maiden. Has very high defense skill, decent protection, and has 3 attacks, including a lance attack, which will kill someone on their first attack. They also have their national hero, who is one of the last Partholonians. She is, however, undead. Now, she casts Air Shield, and then... Okay. That line changes a lot. That line right there changes a lot. Meanwhile, because I didn't know that I was going to be fighting Cataphracts in this province, the Steel Maidens led the way, not the Axe Warriors. The Axe Warriors throw their axes expecting PD. At this point, it becomes a bit of a fight, but my troops do kill the Cataphracts and the PD. However, the Horde of Skeletons starts. Now, Ormuzd troops will kill a lot of skeletons, but we've already routed off our Steel Maidens, and Ormuzd troops will also be killed by skeletons because they don't have enough protection to reliably fend off the damage, and Axe Warriors have very low defense skills. So we're lawnmowering through, and we almost get through. We almost get through. In fact, we did get through in this version of the battle replay. We didn't originally. But the fact that Horde of Skeletons is online at turn 19 changes my calculus a bit. Because in all of the early battles that I saw, Theridos basically steamrolled. Now, they pulled back a little bit for this turn, but I believe the next turn after this, they reinvade this province and they come up here as well. But I look at Sarmatia then, and I'm like, okay, they must have been keeping most of their mages in their forts, researching, or they wouldn't be at Enchantment 5 right now. I'm certainly not at a level 5 research. Could I have been if I researched nothing else? Yeah, maybe. But I'm only just hitting Summon Earth Power. Now, I've been wider in my research paths, but if they have a big block of mages ready to do Horde of Skeletons, suddenly my army is less well suited to killing them. And they have a lot of Cataphracts. And those Cataphracts have not been, as I expected, deployed to face the Therodian undead, which is problematic. So I do some quick calculation at this point. I figure I can probably win. I can probably kill Sarmatia, but there is enough of a block of resistance around here that I think that if we fight, 1, I will lose a lot, and 2, I don't think I can stop Theridos getting just as much as I can. So, if I stay in the war, I don't think it's a winning proposition in terms of cost and time and strategic outcome relative to the material gains. If I leave the war and let him just fight Theridos, then I run into the problem of Theridos killing him still. Can Theridos beat Sarmatia if Sarmatia is going Horde of Skeletons? And the answer is it depends what Theridos is bringing, of course, but they have some cool tools available to them. That you can't just poison Inaris because they're poison resistance. But the combination of numbers, sacreds, they've got their Awake Expander, the mass of what Theridos has available to him at this point means that for me, it's problematic as to whether or not Theridos would actually be defeated by Sarmatia. At the same time, Helheim is an absolute clear and pressing danger. Like, absolutely, like, there was no real resistance here. And as much as Tina Nog wants to fight them, my feeling is that if Tina Nog committed to fighting Helheim, but Helheim having whomped Makoni, there's a real danger that Helheim will just go, okay, I'm going to keep this capital under siege, and I'm going to eat all of Tina Nog in short order. And if they do that, they're unstoppable. You can't beat them at that point. You could maybe enlist Ermor, who's over here. Ermor has some of the coast, Theridos has some of the rest of it. You could maybe enlist them, but there's a river here which limits the front. It's a mess. Something has to be done about Helheim relatively soon. So, at this point, I enter into initial negotiations with both Sarmatia and Theridos. Now, those don't go anywhere initially, and in order to have the upper hand in that those negotiations, I commit at this point to still sending in troops and taking more Sarmatian land. Within the next 2 turns, I have, I think, besieged this fort and this fort, while keeping stealth forces here, and watching for a mage blob or a cataphract blob that might come and try and counter me. And I also bring up some mages with the first of my Strength of Giant and the first of my Swarm Casters, because I get both online relatively soon. However, I enter negotiations with Saramatia and Theridos. And the basic case I'm making is I'm trying to convince Theridos to fight Helheim, knowing that if Theridos fights Helheim, it's likely to be a really, really bloody, and I'm not convinced winning war for Theridos, but it will certainly put a speed bump on Helheim and give Tir na Nog more of a chance. It'll also give me an opportunity, if I can bring enough forces back, to play my own part in the war against Helheim, if Helheim is winning, and see some of Helheim in the process. Now, Theridos is amenable to this idea because he loves attacking people. I don't think he enjoys being the defender. I think he enjoys being the attacker. But he won't do that unless Saramatia is willing to give him a peace. Because as far as he sees it, he deserves something for staying in this war. So I then have to convince Saramatia to accept a peace with me, but on the condition that it's also a peace with Theridos, but understand that I'm not doing it because I like Theridos, it's because I'm trying to throw Theridos into the grinder. And to Saramatia, this quite rightly seems like I'm teaming up with Theridos. No, I'm just trying to set Theridos up to do a job so we don't have to. Those negotiations aren't concluded at this point. So what do you do when you don't have people agreeing on negotiations? Well, you keep negotiating, but you continue putting the pressure on, which is what I intend to do here. Meanwhile, my infrastructure starts to come up. You can see that I'm still site searching relatively continuously, but I'm not getting great luck events either. But my income has increased a little bit from when you saw me on turn 12, thankfully. It's increased by about 30-40%, and we've still got a province down here to take. Just the war has diverted provinces away, troops away from that most of the time. We've started to develop a few undead to bolster our western flank and get us ready to basically build up another force that can take 150 and 137. We want to sweep both of those with the same army developed over here, and which is for the reason for which we're, not yet, but we soon will be recruiting troops there, and we're recruiting leaders outside of our forts. But the basic gambit at this point becomes, I'm not convinced that the war in Saramatia is a winning proposition. I'm convinced our opponent has a threat vector that we can't counter, but the person we don't want to win can counter better than we can. You don't counter Skelly spam with Ormish troops. You just don't. Not efficiently anyway. And as a result, I'm trying to find a way out of this war, even though it looks like after turn 1 I am winning, and I am winning. I continue winning for the next few turns. However, that just because I'm winning doesn't mean it's a good deal for me. In fact, there'd be a bit of an advantage if I can get Theridos to back off. I fully expect that Saramatia would in the future be more likely to want to punt Theridos out than fight me along a one province line directly into an upgraded fort. So, it may well be in my best interests that I can bargain some of this territory back to Saramatia in exchange for them letting Theridos retreat so that Theridos can attack Helheim. The real question here is, why would Theridos take this deal? Now, the answer I think there is they don't see a quick way to victory. They see a way to victory against Saramatia, but they don't see a quick way to victory. Whereas they see the same thing I do, which is that if Helheim is left alone, their game is going to be over. Now, I wouldn't cry over that, but it's a useful argument to make in order to convince them to come over here. And for Theridos, redeployment can be relatively quick. They have a sailing hero, and some sailing capability and high mobility troops. So for them, a redeployment into Helheim is as simple as grouping troops here. That's one move, and then the second move they can be literally landing in Helheim. They can also land down here. Or they can group up, and this troops from this fort can move out and take these provinces here. Now, if we enter the war, it has to be made clear that these provinces can't go to Theridos. And if we enter the war for any reason, it will probably be because we can't allow these provinces to go to Theridos. So I get that what I'm continually doing here is I'm trying to use Theridos while also balancing Theridos. I need them to be doing things that benefit me, rather than this crap fighting Saramatia. But not doing it so well that they become a runaway threat. So that was the early term of this game. It was a mediocre start, followed by a war that was less motivated by material gain and more by counterbalancing a primary rival, which is not normally how I would fight a first war. Normally, my first war would be for material, but we have a way forward. But in order to get that way forward, we're probably going to have to spend another 1 or 2 turns applying pressure so that we can convince all the parties involved that it's a good idea for them to disengage and for Therados to go fight Helheim. That was the early part of this game. In the next part of the game, what I'll take you through is the end of the Saramatian War, how that winds up, and where we go from there. But yeah, Rip and Coney, man. Poor sods.